Correct. So Doug, which was the first chapter you started and where? And which
So
was the
we
year?
actually did three pretty much all at once over a 2 week period of time. So in November of 2014, so a little bit over 5 years ago, we launched in Phoenix, Arizona, which is
Mhm.
the Metro Phoenix area, where I'm based in Scottsdale, is within the Phoenix metro area. Tucson, Arizona, which is about a 2 hour drive south. So between Tucson and Phoenix, they cover the entire state of Arizona, about 7 million people. And the third chapter that launched right about the same time was Salt Lake City, Utah, which basically covers the entire state. And I'm trying to remember, I think there's about 5 or 6 million people within the state of Arizona. So it's three relatively small but important places, all of which I know very well. And that was a kind of a key is, I want to start this thing with areas that where I have a lot of contacts myself, so I can get some traction early and kind of go from there.
Okay. So when was your first overseas chapter launched, and where was it?
So that was a kind of a weird situation because I've lived in Japan,
Right.
and so Tokyo was an important piece of, I figured, very early on. So turned out within the first year of Global Chamber, the first year I would say was pretty tied up with getting the systems and the website and working on shifting from a free service to a pay service. So there was a pretty much of a year of working on the processes. But after about a year, we started thinking, hey, let's build this. So we hosted the ambassador for Japan in Arizona. So the Japanese ambassador to the U.S. And it was a great event. It was spectacular. And in that, he brought several people in his delegation, one of whom was very business oriented fellow. And lo and behold, we had the conversation. He very well connected in Japan. Like, we try to find people that are really deeply connected. And Nobuo became our Global Chamber Tokyo chapter, and off we went in an overseas direction. So I don't remember how many chapters we had by then. One of the keys early on was not to be US centric. There is a US chamber that, as an American, I find a little bit almost offensive, but in a way that any country is, right? Every country is very, we call it in the US, we're a homer. We root for the home team. Everything is in the US chamber is for the US. And we all know in our own countries, we have organizations that are for our own country, and that's great. What we're for, however, is trade everywhere. And so my focus has been differentiating ourselves from those groups, but collaborating. So we collaborate with the US Chamber. We collaborate with JETRO in Japan. We collaborate with MIDA, the Malaysian Investment Development Agency. We collaborate with those groups that are quote unquote homers, trying to get investment or helping their companies succeed. We love that. We think that's great. They do great work and work that we can't do, but they can't do a lot of the things that we do that's cross border or credibility between, let's say, any country that's, say, Malaysia. I love the Malaysians and what they do, but when they're talking to an American, there's a little bit of a skeptical
True.
view. But if an American starts talking about Malaysia, that's a different story. It's like,
You're right.
yeah, you need to consider it. So there are roles like that that Global Chamber plays that we love playing, and we love collaborating with all of those groups.
Okay. Excellent. So when you opened your first overseas chapter in Japan, what was the biggest challenging task you faced? Like, what was the biggest challenge to get it running and acceptable?
I I would say it's probably momentum to what you said earlier about kind of the way things are. The typical chambers, the typical way we've always done things. In Japan, it was actually a little bit even more than that. One of the driving forces for me with Global Chamber is creating or sharing best practices across countries. So one of the best practices, I think, is having women play a role in business. There's no reason why women can't have a role doing business. I learned that when I was running a joint venture in Japan earlier in my career, where we had the smartest person in really probably the company, but certainly in our Osaka office, was an office lady, what they call an OL. And I said, you should get her in sales. We need more help in sales. And they said,
Right.
there's no way in the world she can do
Mhm.
sales. Toyota will never buy from a woman, is what I was told. So, which, it's like, wait a minute, that's ridiculous. That got to be wrong. So those of you who have done work in Japan know to get people to change very often, instead of just saying, no, this is going to be it. We actually, several months, I went out to dinner and did a lot of drinking with these people to say, look, we got to try this. My name and reputation is on the line. Believe me, we'll make this work. And lo and behold, they tried it, and no surprise, she was the best salesperson they ever had. So we tried to get that to happen. And so in Tokyo, however, our chapter has been a little bit behind the curve around understanding the value and understanding about working with women in leadership. And so I've had to do a little bit of that on the side. And so I would say the normal stuff with countries of the traditional chambers and trying to be able to collaborate with them is always an issue. But issues around cultural behaviors and things like that to me seem natural, like women in the workplace, are areas too where I think are both challenges, but I think ultimately are great opportunities.
Absolutely. In fact, while you were talking, I recall when I was doing this mentor on road trip in US. So that time I was also promoting this United Nations Women program called uh, 50-50 by 2030, where their goal is to have gender equality. So that's quite an interesting background you told about Japan. So, Doug, how many chapters do you have now operational across the world? In
So
how many countries?
it was actually an intern the summer before we launched. So almost 6 years ago now, she actually went through the whole world and split it up into 525 plus minus chapters. And so what we call a chapter is an area, a metro area of at least 1 million.
Okay.
Many times they're much larger than that, but at least 1 million, and it includes the surrounding area. So that's why the state of Arizona, there's 2 chapters. The state of Indiana is roughly the same population, but there's only 1 chapter. It's in Indianapolis, but it covers the entire state. There's actually 92 counties. So Indiana's split into 92 more subsegments. But our person in Indiana has actually been to all 92. Wow. Some of the other chapters are Tokyo, very large. Jakarta, very large. Mumbai, very large. So they range, or another, probably the biggest one is the country of Cameroon. So the chapter of Douala captures all of the country of Cameroon, which is, I believe, around 30 million plus people. Very little bit different business. So the 525 has really stayed. And so we have members in almost all of them. Wow. And we help almost all of them. When we originally started, we thought, well, we should have 2 prices, one for chapters where there's a person on our team and other chapters where there's just a member. But what we found was when there's a member there, we can actually connect them to around the world. We can give them an opportunity to speak in presentations. And so the value for them is almost as high as a chapter that has actually events. And now that we're not doing events locally because of the COVID-19, it's more equilibrated the whole system. So really, we've got 525 chapters. We're everywhere in the world, every country, except a couple countries where we're not allowed to do business.
Oh, okay. Right. That's amazing. I don't know of any equivalent chamber or organization in the world with such kind of a reach. Congratulations.